Hi, and welcome to Laura's Library Card. I'm Laura, and today I am here with Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave from
Hi,
Forget
Dave.
Being Cool.
You're watching Forget Being Cool.
Cool, yeah.
Because we're not cool because we read Twilight book.
Yeah, so, yes, Dave and I know each other in real life, and we're friends. And we both read Midnight Sun and Twilight, and actually the whole series, and watched all the movies, because apparently we don't have lives.
So you put up a video on your YouTube channel
I did.
about Midnight Sun, and I saw it and went, oh, I remember that being vaguely a thing that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I never got the full news story about like what it really was. And I knew nothing about the leak or anything that had happened previously.
Oh.
And all I knew was it was an Edward perspective Twilight book. And what I thought that would mean would be it was a Edward flashback storybook
Oh.
where he kills serial killers, which would have been way cooler.
Okay.
Instead of a twice as long retelling of the first Twilight.
So I did not have any of those expectations. I knew what it was going in, because years ago, Stephanie Meyer released that like leaked draft thing. So she had said, she apparently, if I'm remembering this correctly, in some interview, when she first had the dream, yes, Twilight came to her in a dream.
Sure.
It was from Edward's point of view. Like when she first decided to like write this story, tell the story, she was telling it from Edward's point of view. And I never really got I don't have any memory about like why she told it and published it in Bella's point of view, but originally her like purest incarnation was that it was supposed to be from Edward's point of view.
Except if you start thinking about that, it gets kind of creepy.
Why?
Because it's the first chunk of the book, and especially the first like interaction of them, is him debating every possible way to drain her of her blood and kill everybody in the room in less than 20 seconds.
What I meant was that Stephanie's original incarnation was, what if a vampire fell in love with a human? That was her like idea. And so she was thinking like, what would this be like for the vampire? So I think that maybe when she first started to write it, she realized maybe Bella's perspective would be easier or something.
Or
but
not as murdery or creepy.
Maybe she started with like a horror book and then was like, maybe I should turn this into a like young adult paranormal romance.
So one of the reasons I read Twilight originally was when it blew up, it got huge and the movies were coming and we all knew that was a thing and everybody's like, this book's amazing, and every girl in the whole world was reading it, and I'm like the one guy who decided to read it because I read everything that got popular. But the one thing that pushed me over the edge was I originally read Stephanie Meyer's The Host before Twilight. And I thought it was a pretty cool book about aliens and possession. I don't remember. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
And that pushed me enough in the way to read Twilight. And the reason I've enjoyed the series as a book series, I guess, to some extent, is when you're going through it as a book, it's a gushy, lovey, bullcrap book. Mm-hmm. But that's okay in book form. Like, it's 100% okay, because you're just like, they laid in the meadow and loved each other, and that's great.
Yeah.
It's okay for that to go on for chapters and chapters and chapters.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of Midnight Sun, though, there's so much of this, like, the smell of her is in my throat, and I had to kill her.
Yes. From Twilight, it is Bella's perspective is it almost never is like a horror or a thriller. She kind of from the start is like too intrigued and too interested in him and feels a little bit of like frisson of fear, and then like that's it. Like she's like, but I already love him, the end. So she doesn't actually feel the fear over being in love with this vampire until the end of the book, where she's actually being like targeted and chased by these other vampires,
Right.
not her beloved vampire. And yet from Midnight Sun's point of view, it is immediately a
Horrifying.
vampire story that is a horror story that he has to overcome to fall in love with her.
Yeah, but that arc, as much as I understand it, and it's fine, I don't think if this were the book that she had published first,
yeah,
never in a million years would this have blown up to the extent that it did.
I agree.
Never. It wouldn't have worked. Now, what proves there was a perspective in this way, and this is what freaks me out the most, is rereading Twilight immediately after, right? So having every perspective of Edward, everything that happened. There's a lot of like one-liner kind of moments in Twilight that are like, my window was easier to open. That's kind of weird. And then you move on and you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That, if you read that, and even if you went back and reread the series and Midnight Sun didn't exist,
Yeah.
I don't think I would have questioned that line at all. It would have just been like, oh, it's just Bella's little love story, blah, 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 garbage. Like, and then I'm like, wait a minute, he like creepily like greased her window.
Yeah.
And climbed in it. Like, this doesn't work. Like,
yeah, there definitely were. I mean, there was a lot of issues from my memory when the series blew up, 2008 or whatever, where people were like, well, Edward is problematic because he's stalking her, because he's like creepily following her without her consent, like he's in her bedroom, like,
but this is a fantasy romance novel about vampires and werewolves and girls. Like, the people who on the internet despise this and hate this and think Edward is problematic and Jacob is perfect and wonderful because he's so nice and kind. I'm like, no, but he has like serious angry issues. Like, we could go on the list of like negative, bad relationship stuff that's in the original series, and we can point to in fingers in every direction. And like, realistically, the whole thing is problematic. Like, I don't disagree with any of that, but at the same time, I say, okay, yeah, but she also ends up having like a half vampire, half human baby, and none of this is real. So like, So
do you think that Midnight Sun actually tried to fix anything that were problems in Twilight? Like, do you think that Stephanie Meyer took any criticisms or heard the complaints and then like tried to like spin it or change it in Midnight Sun?
I think she did. But at the same time, I don't know if it actually has that effect because of how much damage it does to that belief and that feeling about it being problematic. I think it almost proves how problematic he is more. But anybody who's done anything in like creative writing or taken any of those classes would say characters have flaws. And that's what makes characters characters. And therefore, Edward to have this problem is not... To evaluate him as problematic because he's negative for her is true, but it's also, like, part of the point of the story. So, to say, I hate Twilight because Edward's an abusive boyfriend who doesn't treat her correctly and manipulate and control... Like... Edward is doing his part because of who he is, and I think their relationship is fine by the time everything plays out in the end.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I also think that it's fair to say, as you've pointed out, Edward is a vampire, and we can't really expect a vampire to have the same human sensibilities that we, the reader who is human, to have.
Yeah.
So to me, it never fully bothered me to the extent that I felt other people complained, because I felt like, I was like, well, Edward's got to do what he's got to do. He's a supernatural creature. Like, it didn't detract from the love story for me.
No, and I never felt that they're problematic. I think it's an exaggeration and thing that the internet decided to hate on Twilight, and I think that's mostly because so many people read it. So many people have their own opinions. The internet gives everybody a voice who can say whatever they want, like we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think Midnight Sun helped Edward's case in any scenario. Like when she is getting picked up like by those creepy guys outside in Port Angeles, right? And he reads everybody's minds and then finds them. Like his thought process of I want to go back and murder them is a little bit dramatic. Like
yes. But I mean, he then says to Carlisle, what if they were targeting someone else's Bella? Like he at that point is already convinced that he's in love with her. Right. And so from a like purely visceral standpoint, yeah, he's a vampire. He is like enraged and there's like a little bit of like a bloodlust and an anger happening. And it's like, whoa, dude, like, yeah, okay, you can't just like murder people even if they're bad guys. But at the same time, he's also kind of like morally offended and wants his easiest solution would be justice. He knows he can mete out with his own hands, but he like ends up being satisfied with Carlisle's like, no, like let the humans deal with the human scum. So it's
which actually plays out well, and I agree with those decisions.
Yeah.
And I like that they get back at them.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, every time in your life when somebody has made you angry or upset or and you're like, I have to get back at them, your first thought isn't, I'm going to drag them out of town, get their crimes shown up, and then get them locked in prison away from everybody who I care about. Your option is, I'm going to go back and punch him in the face.
Or key his car.
Yeah, right, yeah. Like, we don't act rationally.
Yeah.
Nobody does. That's not how this world works. And therefore, Edward to be this kind of character isn't a problem.
Mm-hmm. Well, also, I felt like in Midnight Sun, because it's from his perspective, we see Edward sort of beat himself up about his own feelings. Like, he's like, I shouldn't feel this way about her. Like, I should want to protect her. Like, he thinks guiltily and, self-recriminatory way about his emotions to her and his actions toward her. He's like, I can't believe that I'm like stalking her. But then he's like, well, but I love her. And it's like, so on the one hand, you're like, this isn't actually improving things, but at least Edward's like feeling a lot of guilt about it.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm in her bedroom killing spiders for her. Imagine if these spiders bit her.
Yeah. It's like, that doesn't actually like, just because he's in her bedroom to like protect her, like doesn't really mitigate anything.
It doesn't justify that he like noticed that she was cold and shivering and he went and secretly got her a blanket and then took it off of her and then put it back. That doesn't really justify him being in her room without her permission.
And there's like a line in here that says like, Edward is thinking to himself, he's like, well, I at least wouldn't function like that. Like Mike Newton, I'm better than a peeping Tom. I'm like, you were watching this girl sleep without her consent. How is that not peeping Tom? Like,
but he
just
knows
because she has her clothes on? Like, what?
If anything, this book is twice as long, only because he has to go over this 1,000 times about how horrible he is.
Yeah.
I don't think it fixed anything. At the same time, I would like at least a New Moon from his perspective.
I don't think she's going to write any more books from Edward's perspective.
I don't think she is either. And the other thing with rereading the series that I didn't remember at all, because it's been so long since I've read it, is I don't remember Breaking Dawn having a huge chunk of the book being from Jacob's perspective.
Yeah.
I don't remember that at all until now.
Oh. See, so you read the series when it was popular one time through and that was it?
Yeah, that was it. I never reread. I never went through again. The last movies came out and they were in part 2s and I was like, everybody's doing the Harry Potter thing. I'm done. And Eclipse is not a great movie and neither is New Moon and neither is Twilight. So like
I actually reread the series probably every 2 or 3 years since it's come out. So I knew the series like relatively well. Not Midnight Sun part, but the other four. Um, and I wasn't actually team Jacob. I was trying to explain this to somebody. I think I was explaining it to Nicole, my cousin. And I was saying that like, look, like I understood that Bella and Edward were destined to be together. They were like fated soulmates. Like that was how it was going to be. So I was never actually team Jacob because I saw that Bella was supposed to be and was designed to be with Edward.
I agree with that statement 100%.
However,
and that's always the way I felt.
I love Jacob.
Yeah.
A lot. And I definitely swooned over Taylor Lautner more than Robert Pattinson. But like, there are definitely issues with Jacob. You mentioned earlier Jacob having anger issues, and definitely that's a little bit of something. But also, like, Jacob is really manipulative of Bella and he's doing it because he thinks he's the better choice.
And that's
exactly what Edward is doing.
He's doing it intentionally, though. Like,
yeah.
Really intentionally. Like,
yeah. Isn't it in Eclipse where the vampire army is coming to Forks and they that's this whole like tent scene up on the mountain. They get Bella away.
Which mind you, that scene would have been told better from Jacob's perspective. Yes. Or I'd like to go over that scene because that scene drives me nuts now that I reread the series.
I love that scene.
It's arguably my favorite scene in the movie.
Oh, okay.
In the
tent.
Almost, except for one exception in the series of the whole movies. Yeah, in the tent.
Okay.
But in the book, it's told from Bella's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes no sense because she's like half asleep.
Yeah.
And it's kind of stupid. And after we set an established thing of jumping to other people's perspectives and breaking dawn, which is later, we easily could have done that for a chapter in Eclipse.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting why Stephanie Meyer chose to have a big chunk of Breaking Dawn told from Jacob's point of view. I'm not 100% sure why that really had to happen, other than I think that she felt she wanted
stuff to happen that wasn't all about, oh my God, I'm pregnant and dying.
Well, I think that she knew that her being pregnant and her deciding that to maintain the pregnancy, even though she's dying, she thought that would be kind of a hard thing for readers to
digest. I agree.
Understand. And so to try to have someone who is an outsider, aka Jacob, he's not the father or the mother, to have him have a perspective and to have him have a perspective of, oh my God, gross, I think was a good way for the audience to be like on his side and to try to understand from Bella's point of view. I don't think she would have been able to make us understand Bella's point of view if we were inside pregnant Bella's head. And I also think it functioned to set up Jacob's imprinting part.
Or Edward's perspective. If we had jumped to anybody other than Jacob's perspective in that pregnancy era of the story, it wouldn't have worked. But what that segment did and what Midnight Sun proves to me is I would have liked this series told from the perspective of the character that the situation benefits the best.
Yeah.
So like the Port Angeles thing, as much as I think Edward is creepy as crap in it, that scene and that set of events told from Edward's perspective is better than it told from Bella's perspective. I think it's more interesting. I think it's more exciting. I think it's a better thing. And if she were to rewrite the series completely from scratch, right?
She should rotate. Jumping
perspectives constantly would be very beneficial to this entire series as a whole.
I agree. I personally enjoy books written from multiple points of view. I love romance stories where we get both or all the perspectives of the people who are falling in love, because I really enjoy watching those feelings develop. And that's what's most important to me in a romance story, which is sort of why aside, I don't think this is like the best romance story ever because
it's not.
Bella
Secretly, everybody, despite the fact that this is probably the one that the most people have read, it's definitely not the best romance story ever written.
for sure. Bella like sees him and is like, wow, he's hot. And then she's just like instantly infatuated. And like Edward is really not that much better. He's like intrigued and then doesn't want to kill her. And then he's like, in like that's it. Like he's just like over the next couple weeks he like uses other people to spy on her. He listens and eavesdrops and he realizes she's a good person.
Yeah, no,
it
doesn't really work.
You guys have had 4 conversations, and it's like if you actually like lay out the book, like they meet, he disappears for like a week or 10 days or whatever. He comes back and ignores her for like a month.
Yep.
And then there's the van incident happens somewhere in there.
Before he leaves,
Before the ignoring for a month.
Yeah, I think.
Okay, I think
after reading 3 books after that,
Yeah, I think it's like he comes back. They have 1 or 2 interactions. He saves her from the van, and then he ignores her for like a month or 2 months, and then suddenly he's like, I can't ignore her anymore.
Yeah.
And then they agree to hang out, and that first and only hangout that they ever have is at the meadow. So like their first date is the meadow, and it's like declaring their feelings for each other.
As if you could outrun me.
Her to Port Angeles, but like that happens like a day or 2 before the meadow. Like the meadow scene happens on a Saturday. She meets the Cullens on Sunday, and the baseball scene happens that night.
Okay, so this is my major issue with the reread of the series as an adult who's educated and who understands books and novels and stories.
Yeah.
The climax of every single one of these stories, and climax in this series is a bad word to use, but it's the baseball scene and the hunt of Victoria and James comes out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It is not set up. It is not previously established. There's no hints about other vampires being nearby. There's none of this. Now, when you watch the movies, they try to correct that a little bit. Not very well and not very strongly, but at least there's this thing that's also happening. And I remember that from the movies. And rereading Midnight Sun and Twilight, I was like, weren't there like attacks going on during this? And then I'm like, oh wait, there's none of that.
No, there are. You missed it. In the book in Twilight, Edward tells Bella like the day before the baseball scene, he says like one offhand comment saying, oh, I'm going to be keeping an extra eye on you or keeping you close because like there are stranger vampires in the area. So he does say that and like maybe 2 chapters before the baseball scene.
Yeah, but that's not.
And then in Midnight Sun, Alice has the vision of the strangers coming, and that's why she warns Edward. So everyone knows they're coming. And then yes, in the books, I think it's in the 3rd book where the like vampire army is being created. Those are all of the like newspaper clippings that like Charlie's like, don't go to the big city.
Yeah,
that's because there's all these killings.
That's all there. But the James thing comes out of nowhere.
You mean the fact that he like suddenly wants her and is suddenly
and
her?
no matter whose perspective we get, whether we get Edward's or Bella's perspective of that initial moment.
Yeah.
There's nothing setting that up. It's like he's after you. I read his mind. We're gonna go and blow up a dance studio with him in it. Like
I don't know. From Edward's point of view, he sees James. James reacts more, not to like Bella's scent, but reacts more to the fact that Edward and the Cullens are so instantly ready to like protect Bella. And so he is like, ooh, a snack. And then he's like, what's happening? And then when he's like, I still want her. And it should be like a la vampire etiquette should be like, okay, fine. Like you can have our snack. That's fine. And when they're like, no, he's like, oh, okay, cool. And instead of just like being an adult and like walking away and being like, that was weird. People are super possessive of their snack. He's like, I have to figure out how to steal the snack. And so it's like Edward realizes that his and the Cullen's own reactions have triggered this response in James.
Yeah, but it's not. I don't care how people want to spin this. It's not enough. It's not enough for me. Victoria's motivation throughout the rest of the series is fine, and I accept that. And for the sake of setup, this had to happen.
I definitely feel like the third book of Victoria deciding to suddenly create a vampire newborn army, that was something that had not been laid out.
No.
So it was like...
But there is a lot of, like, the werewolves are hunting her in New Moon. And, like, she can't get past them. There's a lot of that. And for the sake of, making this a 4-book series, right? Mm. If we had killed Victoria in New Moon, right? Like, if we had just said, forget her, then the next
wolf got her.
The next villain would have come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And the vampire army is the end. Now, I want to talk about Alice for a second.
Yeah.
Edward's perspective with Alice is arguably my favorite thing in a perspective written book ever.
Yeah.
I love
Alice.
I love Alice. I always did like Alice. Alice is my favorite of all of the characters in the whole series.
Yeah.
But Edward being able to read her mind and them having these like back and forth conversations.
They like play a whole chess game just like mentally.
Yeah.
Like that's awesome.
This is where the series strives and does really well. There are things about this series, despite being kind of stupid, I think are really smart.
Yeah.
Edward and Alice's interaction together is my favorite thing I've read in a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. And I really enjoyed In Midnight Sun. I'd say probably one of my top favorite moments is the whole like battle focus when they're trying to cross Phoenix to like get to Bella. And Jasper is like using his ability to make everyone work in sync, and like he like is like keeping everybody focused, and like they're in the car, and Edward describes how like Jasper looks out the back left, Emmett looks out the back right, he can see out the front, and so he has a 360 view because he can look in their heads, and he's also getting a 30 seconds in the future look because Alice is looking to see if they're gonna like run into problems, and I was like, this is so cool.
And it's like when Jasper Emmett jumps on the back of the car and Bella freaks out in the original book, and Edward's just like, it's Emmett. Like, that level of chillness is so cool, and it worked in the movie really well. And I think if they were to ever remake the series, like to remake the movie series, using Midnight Sun as the base would be a lot better and a lot better of a play out of a movie.
Maybe.
Here's where the movies do really well, though. And I didn't remember this at all. And because there was a big gap between me reading the books and finishing the movies, this drives me bonkers. The best thing about the movies, and I always remembered this, was that final battle in Alice's perspective and jumping back to it being like, that didn't happen. That is a great movie twist. It's real good. It doesn't happen in the book. It's all, Bella used her shields to save everybody. It's like, no, that's dumb. This Alice perspective thing would have worked way better. Yeah.
I remember being in the movie theater. I dragged my husband along to the midnight release of Breaking Dawn and part 2. And so we're all sitting there, and it's like this tense moment, and then this fight is breaking out, and people are literally screaming in the theater, "Oh my God, I can't, like, oh my," because like it's like Carlisle dies, like this person, like a bunch of the Cullens die, everyone's freaking out. I look over at Ben, and I'm just like,
you're like, this didn't happen in the book.
And Ben is like, yeah, he's like cheering, he's like excited, and then it's like, roll. And Alice was like, that's what would happen. And everyone in the theater was like, oh my God. And Ben was just like, what?
And I think that initial shock, when you get that initial swing, I think if you didn't read the book, right, if you're just Ben, right?
Yeah.
Just going to the theater with his wife, going, man, that's a cool battle. That didn't happen. That's a bummer.
Yeah.
But if you read the book and that didn't happen, and you saw this, and then it didn't happen because it was all in Alice's head,
yeah,
it's so cool.
It was cool.
It is really cool, and I'm for just that moment and just that twist, I give the movies quite a pass on being a pretty good series.
Yeah. Well, from when you're reading the book Breaking Dawn, like honestly, like Bella is a vampire for maybe half the book, like the second half of the book, right?
Oh, not
so,
barely, but yes.
Yeah. And so from the top, so she is turned, like I think they say, like on her birthday or a day after her birthday or something, which is like mid-September. And the vampires of Volturi, everybody comes like the week between like Christmas and New Year's. So she's been a vampire for like not even 3 months.
Yeah.
Or like maybe 3 months and like a couple weeks. And yet she's managed to like figure out how to use this shield, like figure out how to use the shield over all these people.
And they set up this battle is coming, but that last half of the book is like, we recruited the blah blahs to be witnesses. We got this. We did that. We did. These people came. These people like. That's all it is, and it's not good. Like,
I enjoyed the recruiting of all the other people. Like, it was kind of cool to see people and friends coming, especially to see everybody else's like abilities show up. But yes, the actual Volturi arrive, and there's like 50 pages of everyone standing there tense and ready, and it's just conversation. It's just RO being like, well, let's talk it through, like over and over and over. And you're just like, so is it going to happen? Is this going to be it? Is he going to figure it out? And then then he's like, let's have another talk, another point. And I'm like, okay.
It'd be like if in Harry Potter, right? You know, I'm just going to use this as an example because everybody has this as a perspective. It'd be like if at the end of Harry Potter, when he goes out to confront, Voldemort in the woods, they're like, they talked it out. Yeah. And then they both walk back to the castle and they're like, yep.
We're good.
We're good. I'm not going to kill Muggleborns anymore. It's a bad idea. Secretly, I'm half-blood anyway. So, this is kind of dumb anyway. We're going to stop killing people for no reason. That's what happened.
Well, I remember even the very first time I ever read Breaking Dawn, I remember thinking, is this series really over? Because yes, they have a big confrontation and they sort of win and everything's good. But the Volturi are not defeated. They're not murdered. They're not killed. So I was like, and everybody's immortal here. So are we going to later eventually get another book that's book 5? And it's going to be year 2150 and everyone looks exactly the same. We're in flying cars and the Volturi show up again because more problems. You know what I mean? I always thought that she kind of didn't have a giant battle because there was maybe more to the story.
Yeah, no, definitely rereading it. That's the feeling I got. I was like, this is not how you end this series. I know it's a romance, and I know they need to fall in love at the end, and they do. But even the end of it is so quick. They're like, the Volturi left, and all our friends left, and then we went back to our cottage and raised our baby, and it was fine. And it really does play out like that. There's not enough here. It doesn't. Yeah. Versus the movie's ending, I can accept. Because basically it's you fight us, you'll lose. Yeah. Right? And we got the fight. It just didn't actually happen.
Right.
Which is fine. That's a good twist.
Yeah.
And I think we deserve more books in different perspectives far in the future.
Well, so not long after... I don't know if it was long after the announcement or if it was mid-August after Midnight Sun was actually released. I think it was mid-August. Stephenie Meyer said she has intentions to write another 2 or 3 books in the Twilight world.
Yeah, she did say this, and it's mostly, I think, because Midnight Sun sold extremely well for a book
which
in 2020.
No one was surprised about, in my opinion.
Nobody should be surprised about that. look, you put out a YouTube video, and I was like, you know what? What's the audiobook cost? $16? Sure.
So you bought the audiobook?
Yeah, I bought it. I've never gotten the library things to work. Laura's library card. Laura, where's my?
I will give you a tutorial.
I've never gotten the library audiobooks to work, and I love audiobooks. And I was like, $16, and I'm like, how long is this? I scrolled down. I'm like, 23 hours and some. I'm like, what? What is this? These aren't that long. That's a Harry Potter book. And so I immediately have to go check Breaking Dawn. I'm like, Breaking Dawn's like 17 hours. Like, that's the longest book. I'm like, this isn't longer? And I'm like, well, $16. I'm just going to read it. Because
that's not even $1 an hour.
Yeah. Sure, why not? And then I ended up buying the rest of the books in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And rereading them. I have the first 3 at least on CD, but listening to CDs in 2020 is
so passe.
It's not ideal.
Yeah. I've listened to the main 4 from Bella's point of view. I listened to those. Actually, that was how I reread them.
Read by Ileana Kadushin.
Yeah, I liked her voice. I thought she did pretty well. And I was listening at like 1.75, maybe 2, just because I've heard it before and I know the story.
She's slow.
And I think she is kind of slow. I listened to just an audio sample of Midnight Sun after you said that you were going to listen to it. I was like, I tried to get the audiobook, but from the library, like when it was first released, but there was a very long wait list. But I listened to just the sample part, and that sample sounded so like gravelly and sexy.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, Edward is supposed to be like 17 and like cultured. Like, I definitely did not think the voice matched.
If you listen to Breaking Dawn, they actually do jump narrators, and even at the end of Eclipse, to give Jacob a voice, and his voice is almost exactly what I would,
I thought Jake's voice was great.
Perfect. Ileana Kadushin is what I see Bella as. It was why the movie version of Bella. I hate it. I hate her so much. It's not good. It's not her. It's not even the character, which is the problem with the movies. Edward, on the other hand, I expect like silvery kind of smooth 17-year-old, like, I'm really illiterate but also like the cleanest guy in the world and sound like it, and instead it's I'm a vampire and
it was well, the guy who did the voice for the audiobook for Midnight Sun is an actor who was in the Host movie.
They made a movie for the Host?
Yeah, the movie has.
I didn't know that at all.
Yeah, it has. The main character is, what's her name? Her name's like Source Ronan or whatever.
I don't remember at all.
Okay. Yeah, they made a movie of the Host, and it was kind of weird. But I remember reading the Host after Twilight, and I liked it. It's long, but I liked it. I liked the concept. I liked the world, and that was definitely left for future books, and I don't think she's ever written any other after.
I don't think it's sold well enough for anybody to care.
It's a bummer. I thought it was kind of an interesting concept.
I think it'd make a pretty cool movie, which I'm gonna go find out.
It did. But yeah, one of the actors from that movie is the guy, his name's Jake Abel. He was also in like a couple episodes of Supernatural, but I never watched Supernatural. But yeah, like I listened to that audio soundtrack or the audio sample, and I was like, this guy's voice is like an adult romance voice, not a 17-year-old Edward's voice.
It's a little rough, but remember that Edward's older, and he's not really 17, and he's not really, from this era. Listening to it all the way through, I think it worked. It gives me a very different perspective on Edward. But I think that book would do it no matter what. Whether I had deep, gravelly, tough guy version of Edward, it's almost the voice of what I think Emmett should be.
Okay.
And not Edward. But I accept it. Yeah. If we ever write another book and it's jumping multiple perspectives, I would like the audiobook to have all three
multiple
of them.
Narrators.
All of them come back. And heck, the real thing I would like is them to read the whole series together. And so anytime anybody talks, If
Yeah,
it's
a full cast.
yeah, it's a full cast because I actually think the three of them together would do really well.
Yeah.
And give the guys Charlie's voice and etc. But
Right.
pass it around, and I think it would be quite interesting to listen to it that way.
A
Ileana
full
Kadushin is
performance.
very, very relaxed, and I think she portrays Bella well because Bella is calm, but
Mm,
able to jump on a dime, like,
yeah.
and that's what makes her who she is. Not
Mhm.
movie version of Bella, who's I just love him and I just lay here and I don't really say nearly enough, and I'm definitely not snippy enough at all.
Yeah. I felt like that was a big complaint also when the books and movies were really popular, that people were like, Bella's just a blank slate. Bella has no personality. Bella is just like 100% an empty box that like people and readers project, young women project themselves into her place because she's literally just a name. She has no personality. And I'm like, did you read the books? Like, she's smart. She likes to read. She has the attitude. She like snaps back. She comes up with the plans to like save herself. She figures out how to like trick Charlie. She's like not good at lying. Like she really cares about people. I was like, oh, well, is that not a personality? Like,
anybody who says that did not read the books. Period.
Yeah.
That's my argument that the series is quite good, despite the fact that it's gotten a lot of hate. It's not perfect. It's not the greatest romance story of all time. Mm-hmm. And I'll stand by that. But it is by no means a bad series. And I'm not ashamed to be the one guy who read it. So
I actually heard someone else say on BookTube, it was Jess from Books Past Bedtime. You should check out her content because she's great. But she did a Twilight reread, and she was saying that she felt like actually Stephanie Meyer did a nice job in Twilight and New Moon kind of laying out that Bella didn't fit well with the humans. There was multiple other times where she was like, and so Jess was saying, and I thought this was very interesting and hadn't thought of it this way, that she felt like that was Stephanie Meyer laying out and foreshadowing that Bella was going to become a vampire. And like it says in Breaking Dawn, once she is a vampire, she's like, it was as if I was made to always become a vampire. Like she had never quite fit well, navigated well in the human world because she was destined to be a vampire.
No,
and I think that's a really interesting perspective.
I 100% agree with that. And it's almost to the extent that Charlie almost doesn't fit into that world either. And the reason she likes being with Charlie so much is they both have this calm demeanor that doesn't fit with, oh my God, I want to go shopping and go put on dresses. Like she hates everyone around her. Like seriously, all the humans, even the guys, their attitudes drive her nuts.
Yeah.
And from Edward's perspective in Midnight Sun, it's not as apparent, but he can kind of start to see it. And then when you reread Twilight immediately after, you're like, oh yeah, no, she just doesn't want anything to do with this nonsense at all.
Yeah.
So,
was there anything in Midnight Sun that you wish would have been included but wasn't in this giant, super long book? Like, did this giant, super long book still leave anything out that you had wanted to see? Or you didn't really think of it that way?
No, I never thought they left me anything I didn't want. The only thing that drove me a little bit bonkers about Midnight Sun and its length is the Twilight moments. These are the movie moments. These are the things that people remember. I'm like, I've heard this story.
Yeah.
I get it. And when Edward didn't have anything to add to that perspective, I easily could have moved on. I don't need to see every moment of Bella interaction again.
Well, there were definitely, yes, there are lines that are said in Twilight that she, their conversations, and those are essentially reprinted word for word. And I think that that's because like Stephanie Meyer couldn't retcon anything or like a risk paraphrasing. She really did have to be like, Bella said X, so Bella needs to say X in this book. And what happened in Midnight Sun is that Edward would be having a conversation with Bella, and in Twilight it would be she said, he said, she said, he said, Bella thought about it and then responded. And in Midnight Sun it was like Edward waits for her comment, and then she says it. And then he's like, he analyzes her comment. He thinks about what's happening. He reads someone else's mind. Finally, he responds. And so it's like, it's so long because Edward is able to think 5 times faster than Bella. And therefore, there is 5 times more content that is happening outside of the actual lines of dialogue.
Well, right. But the other problem is that paraphrasing, like that problem they can't do that, is when there's a conversation and a long stream of conversation, it's the same conversation. And it's not even so much it's the same conversation. It's the same conversation I had in the movie. It's the same conversation I had in Twilight, and it's the same conversation I had in Midnight Sun.
Yeah.
There would have been a benefit to maybe Edward being generic guy at some points where he's like, I was totally listening. And instead we're getting, I was reading the dude across the room's thoughts and blah, 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 and not paying attention to her at all, instead of me reading the same conversation twice. And maybe that's my fault for reading both books back to back and watching the movies. And this is something you should never do. Every time a Harry Potter book came out, because the last 5, 6, and 7 came out, I reread all the books going up to them every single time. Every time a movie came out, I reread all the books. Even if even when the first movie came out, I would reread all the books before the first movie came out.
Oh my gosh.
And I did that every time. That's why I've said I'd read Harry Potter more times than I could even keep track of at this point.
Yeah.
I don't recommend doing that with Midnight Sun, although I do recommend reading Twilight and Midnight Sun together. But you don't need to go further.
Well, when that draft was leaked or whatever, I read it. My memory of this is that Stephenie Meyer was working on this draft of Midnight Sun, and then she had given a couple different copies to a couple select rare trusted people, and she would do a little work, and then she's like, I'm going to send this copy to so and so. She'd do a little work and send a copy to so and so. So when it got leaked, she knew exactly who had leaked it because she knew which version everybody had. And what I remember.
And she was devastated.
And she was devastated and said, no, forget it. I'm not going to keep writing this. She kind of cleaned up the leaked version and made it available for free on her website because she wanted the fans to enjoy what was out there. It was already out there. Like the fans could already pirate it or whatever.
Right.
So she just put it on her website and was like, here's what's what. And so I read that and had that document and had read it multiple times. And I had sort of done a side-by-side comparison a few years ago where I was reading Twilight officially published, fully done, compared to this draft. So I've done the side-by-side comparison. And it is obnoxious to read the same lines.
I think it's. I use the window example as the one example I remember definitively, but there's a lot of little things in Twilight that get explained in Midnight Sun, and they don't feel like she decided to put that in Midnight Sun to explain that comment in Twilight. It doesn't feel like that. It feels like that was a thing that already happened.
Yeah. I agree.
If we were to read her, her book Bible, for the original Twilight,
right?
There's a note next to Bella's window was easier to open, and then there was Edward greased it,
right? I think that Stephenie Meyer was able to write Twilight with both perspectives in mind.
Oh yeah.
And so so when it says Bella went to sleep and slept well. The next morning, in her head, she's writing all this stuff about Edward comes to her house,
gives her a
this
blanket,
is what he would have done. And so in Stephenie Meyer's movie, it's sort of the two books spliced together, but only Twilight was getting typed out. That's what I think happened. Because then she was able to say the window was greased better. Some, the blanket appeared and disappeared. Well, you know what I mean?
And this is my big issue with the movies, especially the first 4 of them, is this story very much heavily relies on these tiny moments. This is what this story is. It's a love story.
Yeah.
This does not translate to movie form in any capacity at all. It just doesn't move that way. The story doesn't lend itself to that. There is no point where you're like, yeah, they did that better in the movie, except for the battle. They need those interactions, and when they cut something out of the movies, it's way worse than any of these other book movies. These book adaptations, when they cut these moments are what makes the characters who they are, what moves the plot forward, what changes everything, and these are tiny, insignificant moments. But they don't. You can't portray them in the movie.
I mean, I agree to some extent in that a lot of the book is told in first person. It's Bella's thoughts. She's thinking about things. There are these like long, lingering looks, like a quick brush of hands. And a lot of that in the books functions to raise the tension, to connect the two of them. And I agree that those are what's hardest to portray on film. However, I do think the movies inherently were a pretty good love story.
The story takes place in 2005.
Okay.
Roughly. The era is 2005. Now, there's references in the movies to like 2011 or something, because that's when the movies came out, and it's wrong. Okay. Those movies, watching them again, are a perfect example of what was wrong with movies at the time of when those movies came out.
Oh.
And I think, after rereading these, and I've said this for Harry Potter, I've said this for lots of book series, Netflix throw a ton of money at this. Make me an 8-part series. You know, an 8 miniseries of just Twilight. Just the first Twilight book. Just give me, like, some real, like, you know, book to script. Book to script style version of this story, and I think it works. But when you say, let's make it 2.5 hours, I mean, it takes 16 hours to read one of those books, to listen to that book. Now, you can throw out a lot of stuff, but that doesn't, you can't throw out 14 hours worth of stuff. And I just think there's a bunch of people who never read these books, who think this stuff is stupid, and then Midnight Sun came out, and they're like, this just proves how stupid it all is. And we're at this point where I'm like, you know what? Midnight Sun, I think, actually does benefit this series really well.
I agree. I
think it's very good. I think it's a story that I will continue to realize is kind of stupid, but I also enjoyed it. So
yeah, I thought The Midnight Sun was a good addition to the Twilight universe. I felt like we got some good canon, new stuff, content in Midnight Sun. I think the actual like minutia of like what Edward is thinking in a standard boring conversation is not really contributing a ton. But I thought that it was like the whole battle focus part was amazing. I really enjoyed Alice and Edward's interaction, like finding out more about Jasper and Emmett and Alice, and all the Cullens. I think a lot of people really like the Cullens. Like there's Bella and the Cullens and like Charlie and Jacob, and like though everyone else you don't really care that much about. Maybe some of the werewolves, but the Cullens were the characters everyone cared about and wanted to know more about. And I think Midnight Sun functioned to give us more Cullen time.
It gives me Emmett, Rosalie. It makes me care about Jasper. It makes me care about them so much more than I did the first time through this series.
Yeah,
and I will give it that. Now, this is why I say I don't necessarily need Eclipse from Edward's perspective. I don't necessarily need Breaking Dawn from Edward's perspective. I actually think that would be really bad, because his idea is kill the baby and save Bella. And as much as I understand his perspective, and as much as I feel like his heart's in the right place for the story, because all he wants is Bella to be safe, right?
Yeah.
There is a bunch of people on the internet who cannot handle hearing that perspective of the story.
For sure.
It would blow up in Stephanie Meyer's face, and she would have never-ending
And
hate. And
as a Mormon woman, I don't think she would write that.
I don't think she would either, but I understand that she can't do that. New Moon, on the other hand, Edward's gone the whole time. Give me that book.
I don't want that book.
I do.
I've heard so many people say that they would love to have New Moon from Edward's perspective. And I'm like, why? He wasn't there. I don't care. He literally says to Bella at the end of New Moon, after she's gone to rescue him and they're like flying back or whatever, they have this talk. He's like, I was just like curled up in a ball without you. Like my family was just like, I could barely make it a minute without you. I was like, so New Moon from Edward's perspective, would him be like, the whole time?
Yeah, see, that requires a retcon.
Yeah, they would definitely have to like really spice up a lot of the other Cullen interactions, trying to like, let's go out, Edward, let's do something. And like, that would be fun. But like, just to have Edward be like, I wonder what Bella's doing.
Yeah, no, I agree with
that would be no fun to read.
I agree with you. That would suck. But if there was a side plot,
sure,
something else that is happening,
an adventure.
Yeah, another completely not related adventure that ends up leading to him going to Italy. And I want the book to stop there. I don't want to hear.
Okay.
I want to die. Bella killed her. I don't want to read that. Nobody wants to read that.
Right.
But something else happening to Edward that entire time, I think could be fascinating. And I think there's a gap here to do it. Anyway,
I'm not interested in New Moon from Edward's perspective. I'm interested in New Moon from Jacob's perspective.
Let's jump back between Jacob and Edward. That whole book,
and becomes a werewolf, and like is going through puberty, and is like having feelings for Bella. Like the whole dynamics of becoming a wolf and learning about the pack. Like I think that'd be fascinating.
I was gonna say, jump back and forth, make it a dude perspective book the whole way through. Yeah. And just jump between Jacob and Edward. And the benefit that would do is Jacob
and Edward. I thought you were going to say Jacob and Bella. Okay.
Well, but Jacob is with Bella that whole time. So therefore, giving us a perspective of where we are in the course of events.
Yeah, that's true. That'd be good. I would read that. I don't know. I think that if Stephanie Meyer writes more in this universe, I think we're going to get a Renesmee Jacob story.
Gross.
Tell me how you really feel.
I'm so uncomfortable with that idea. I understand that Jacob doesn't age and he'll wait till she ages up to proper age and blah, blah, blah. And it's a fantasy book and I need to let it go, but I don't want that. The imprinting thing, no matter how we justified it and rereading it, I feel like I accepted it as a thing because I felt like I saw it coming and it was being built up throughout the book and I understood why it happened. At the same time, I still stand by my original feeling of that entire situation as ew gross.
Ew gross. Nicely succinct. Ew, gross.
Yeah. I liked Midnight Sun. The whole point of this is...
I did too.
I liked it. I liked it enough to reread the whole series.
Yeah.
I think the movie, the Breaking Dawn Part 2's twist is enough to save the entire movie series as a whole. And I think Midnight Sun gives me enough alternate perspective to enjoy the series a little bit better.
I agree.
Good job, Stephanie Meyer.
Yeah.
I'm Dave Moore from ForgetBeingCool.com. That's Laura from Laura's
and
Library Card.
Dave approves. Dave approves this message.
Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button down below. Click the bell. Laura's got 100 subscribers. She's doing better than I've done.
I have 150.
Wow. Hi.
I'm moving up in the world.
Hi to all 150 of you who watched the first 3 seconds. And then the 80% of you who are not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. And then I've done YouTube for a long time.
Thanks so much for having this great conversation with me, Dave. It was wonderful. And maybe when the next 50 Shades from Christian Grey comes out, we'll have another discussion.
I've never read those books. If that happens, I'll read them.
She's already written 2, I think, from Christian's perspective.
Oh,
I think.
I didn't even know. I've never read any of those books.
Oh my gosh, well, you should reread them. They're basically Twilight fan fiction. That's how they were started. So it'll be familiar to you.
Okay.
Okay, go read 50 Shades and come back to me.
I'll see you soon, Laura, on your library card channel.
Thanks. This has been Laura from Laura's Library Card. Thanks for watching. Bye.